The subject I've been asked to speak about for this session is the subject of decision making. I'm not going to give you textual sources. They range widely over the whole system of Mussar, which means Jewish personality building or character construction, if you like. But what I'm going to do, with your permission, is give you a very practical guide to the question of decision making. I hope you'll find this useful and be able to use it in many circumstances in your life. And if you have a text, I will suggest to you that the text you need for this session is a chart of white paper and a pen. And after I've had my say, I suggest that you actually go through the exercise and make a decision together as a group based on the idea which I will share with you, and I think it'll become plain as we go through that discussion. So let's talk about the principles of decision making from a Jewish point of view. I think that you will see that a lot of this is in fact common sense. I don't think you need necessarily to be Jewish for this. A lot of it is universal. But we find our sages, and particularly, as I said, our latter-day sages in the Mussar movement, putting things in this fashion. And I think you'll find it a remarkably clear and organized way to go about life decisions that are often very confusing. You know, I record these words in the month of Adar. We have the Battle of Purim at this time. And of course, it's relevant all year. Takes us forward into Pesach and beyond, of course. And the battle against Amalek is the battle against doubt. Amalek, the gematria, the numerical equivalent of the word Amalek, is Safek, meaning doubt. And we are plagued by doubt in our decision making. Right? This is a major theme. In order to reach Pesach, which is the moment of redemption, we need to get through Purim. Purim is the defeat of Amalek, which really means at a higher level, gaining clarity. You make a life decision, it needs to be clear. What pulls you down? The faculty of doubt. We do not know how to make clear decisions. Let's talk about some of the principles. Let me say very clearly the major approach that we have to life decisions, and then we'll try to break it down and go into its parts. Here's the order of business. When you need to make a life decision, whether it is moving home, getting married, buying something that's more expensive or less expensive, all of these types of questions, any major and taxing life decision should be broken down into two principles. The two principles are, number one, take out the nagias, and number two, clarify the tzdodim. Let me explain those. Take out the nagias means remove from the decision-making process all the ulterior motives and vested interests. What we mean by a nagia is something that is touching you in a way that biases your thinking. Step one in the decision-making process, move into the zone of objectivity. We'll talk about how to do that. But while you are as yet subjective, something biasing your thinking, you cannot hope to make a wise decision. So step one, take out the nagias. Step two, clarify the tzdodim. Line up the two sides of the decision, clarify the issues, crystallize each major and minor component of the decision-making issue into a clear map of details with correct weighting. I'll explain this also. Once you have done those two stages, you simply total the result and you will have a clear decision. Right, let's break down these two. Let's take both of these in turn. Let me say at the outset, before we look at them in detail, the two major obstructions to making clear decisions. Okay? One is when you go through the exercise and you balance out all the variables and you get exactly 50-50 balance at the end. You've taken out all the vested interests, you've reached objectivity, you weight up all the issues, and it ends up exactly 50-50. The wrong response to that paralyzing situation is to become paralyzed, to stand there not knowing what to do. The correct response is choose either side. It makes no difference. Flip a coin, right? If you've weighted the issues and you've come to a clear vision of the fact that the decision could go either way, there are exactly the same balancing factors on both sides. Instead of standing there paralyzed and not making a decision, choose either one. You know, if you're playing football and you have the ball and you're under pressure, you're being attacked, you're being tackled, and there are two potential receivers, you could pass the ball to either one. And in a split second, you make an analysis of the field. And you see that both those potential receivers have exactly 50% chance of being successful. What do? Stand there paralyzed? No, you pass to one of them. Which one? It makes no difference. It may seem a little strange, but this can apply to major life decisions too. You are a young man deciding whether to marry Miss A or Miss B, both of whom are exceptionally charming. And you don't know, this should happen to you by the way, that you have all these options, right? It happens all too seldom. But let's say you have these two very attractive options, and you know them both very well, and you weigh it up, and you get exactly 50-50. What do? Not get married? No, you flip a coin. If there's absolutely nothing to tell between them, then you make a decision, whichever one it may be. Sometimes you have Torah principles that can guide such a paralyzed situation. For example, let's say the choice is between action and non-action. There we have a very clear Torah principle: always opt for the non-action. That means if harm will accrue from a decision, let the harm accrue because you failed to act rather than because you acted. This is very important in medical law and life and death issues. Right? If you don't know whether a medical intervention will save a life or kill, and non-action may allow the patient to die or allow him to survive, the clear medical decision to make in that situation is do nothing. It is better that your patient should die because you failed to save him than because you killed him. Again, the background to this, of course, is where the outcome is 50-50 either way. You're not swaying the patient's chances. So there are situations where specific Torah principles guide our decision-making. But the wrong thing to do is to stand there paralyzed and decide nothing. That's the first paralyzing element in this process. And the second paralyzing or extremely negative way to handle these decisions is to come to a conclusion for whatever reason, and as you move down that path, you stand at the fork and you have a left road and a right road. And for whatever reason you come to the conclusion that the right-hand fork is the one that you must take. And what do? You start moving down the right-hand fork, but instead of doing it wholeheartedly, you look over your shoulder and hanker after the one that you did not choose. That is a disaster. You marry Miss A, but your whole married life you're having fantasies about Miss B and telling yourself that she would have been better. That is a disaster. The Torah decision-making principle that governs these situations is, once you've made your decision, that should be all that remains. You have a decision to make in life: marriage, moving home, major decisions in life, perform surgery, don't perform surgery, do this operation, do that operation, whatever your options are. And you make a very careful analysis and you conclude that option A is backed by 51% evidence and option B backed by 49% evidence. What do you decide? You decide on option A. That's where the preponderance of evidence is. It's 51%. The other one's only 49%. But as soon as you've made that decision and choose the 51% option, you should see it as 100%. The 49% option should disappear completely. Because as long as you look over your shoulder, you never do either one fully. Right? The one you're doing is not done fully because you're hankering after the other one. The one you left behind you did not do, and therefore you achieve neither one fully. And so, let me repeat again. If the conclusion is 50-50, choose either one, but choose one. If the conclusion is weighted in favor of either one, no matter how weighty or minor the preponderance is, you choose it and then you do it 100%. When you pass that football to the receiver that you've chosen, you pass it to him 100%. And that becomes total motivation. Once you've made your marriage choice, you invest yourself in that marriage 100%. The fact that there was another option in the past is now irrelevant. Let's go back to the beginning and look at our two principles. Number one, take out the nagias. Well, how do you take out the vested interests? And here there are two tools that you can note these down. Number one, you have to learn brutal honesty with yourself. Brutal, ruthless objectivity. To grasp the situation as it really is, not through the cloud of your fantasies, but as it really is. Obviously, that can be very difficult to do. But that's the first goal. The second tool is aseh lecharav. You need a teacher. The disciple needs a master. This is a mitzvah. The Mishnah tells us aseh lecharav. At all costs, make yourself a teacher. Who should your teacher be? Somebody who knows more than you, who's more mature than you, who's reached a greater objectivity than you have, and above all, who's not afraid to tell you the truth about yourself. The truth may be painful, it may be humiliating, but that's exactly the kind of teacher you want. As long as you choose a teacher who only compliments you, you will never get anywhere. It is true that many people, and particularly young people, and particularly children, need tremendous compliments. I'm not denying that. But when you reach a phase of maturity, you want a teacher who's critical. Think about it this way. If you take a martial arts teacher, do you want a teacher who tells you you are constantly doing fine? No. You want a teacher who breaks a few ribs of yours from time to time. It may hurt you, but it will save your life. And therefore, a good teacher should be thin on compliments and heavy on criticism. Of course, you have to have the fiber to be able to take it. But as long as you are attached to someone who's only complimentary and never shows you your errors, you will never develop. And therefore, I will repeat, two tools. One is learning brutal, ruthless honesty about yourself. And two, Get your teacher to do it. Now, what happens if your teacher is not around? You're in a difficult situation and your teacher is nowhere to be seen. It's 6 in the morning, it's freezing outside, it's warm in bed, you know you should get up. And you struggle with a decision, right? Should you stay in bed another hour, get an extra hour's sleep and you'll be rocket powered today? Or should you get up and splash your face with cold water and have a strong coffee and you'll achieve an extra hour in the day? And now most people, that decision takes only about 10 seconds and they go back to sleep. Of course, if you have a very powerful Yetzer Hara, not just a common or garden one, he keeps you in bed for an extra hour debating the point. Of course, because he's out to kill you. But be that as it may, you've opened your eyes at 6 in the morning, you do not know whether it's better to get out of bed and achieve or better to have an extra hour's rest, and that can be a difficult decision. Your Rebbe's not around at that time, but he is. You know your teacher. Ask yourself at that point, what would he say? Or what would she say at this point in time? Although your Rebbe is not present, when you objectify the issue, put yourself out of your situation, right? Of course, you can do that literally. Leap out of bed before you make the decision, and standing out of bed, come to make the decision. Even then it can be very difficult, but it's better than acting and deciding in the territory of the enemy. So ask yourself what your teacher would say. I must tell you that many times in life, when I have to make a major decision, I ask myself what my Rebbe would say. I must tell you that many times in my life, when I've had to make very difficult medical decisions, I ask myself what my father would have said. Even though my father, who was a wonderful doctor, is no longer alive, but I knew him well. I knew what his medical decision-making principles were. And I only have to ask myself, in confusing situations, what would he say to me now? It's immediately apparent what his decision would be. And so in summary, learn to be objective. Put your emotions aside, right, before you make the decision. And then put your emotions back in. When you're deciding whether to marry Miss A or Miss B, emotions are very important, but they should not be ruling the decision. They should be one of the elements in the decision-making process. And rule 2, Aseh lecha Rav. Ask yourself what your teacher, best of all, ask your teacher. If you cannot be asked, ask yourself what he would say in that situation. There's a third option too, by the way. After you've made the decision and it's too late, ask your teacher anyway. You'll learn for the next time. Go to your teacher and say, I had a difficult decision to make yesterday. This is what I decided. And learn from his response how to analyze that situation correctly. Finally, let's turn our attention to the second principle. Clarify the tzdodim. Here's where you take your chart of paper, you draw a line down the middle, and on one side you head the one option, and on the other side of the chart you head the other option. You're deciding whether to move home. So on the left-hand side of your chart you put stay put, on the right-hand side you put move home. And then you make a detailed list of all the variables that are relevant. This one's closer to the bus, this will save me money, that will be more expensive, right? This is a better area. You put down all the variables that are possibly relevant. And then you give each one a weighted score. Right? This is worth 1 out of 10. This is worth 9 out of 10. This is equivocal. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. You weight both sides of the decisions. Let me be clear about this. On the left-hand side of the chart, you write all the variables. Pros and cons. On the right-hand side of the chart, you put all the variables, the pros and cons. And then you go through each element and you give it an appropriate weight, appropriate score. Of course, you can only do this after you've taken out the negiyas. If you're deciding to move home, and the one option, is closer to a place where they sell 32 flavors of ice cream, and in your mind you've actually given that 995 out of 10, then you will not come to an objective decision, obviously. So we're talking about, and the 32 flavors of ice cream indeed may be important, and they may be important to you, so recognize that and put it in. But first you need analysis not to omit any of the decision-making variables. And secondly, you need objectification. What is each one worth genuinely? Some are much more important and some are much less important. Once you've made a total analysis of all the variables, simply add the scores. I know this sounds a little mercenary when it comes to making a marriage decision, but that is how it works. I must tell you that when I got married, I was contemplating the issue, and I knew a very wonderful older woman at the time. She said to me, why don't you write it down? And I thought that was a very bizarre way to decide on whether to get married or not. But I took her advice. And I must tell you that the moment I wrote it down, objectively on a piece of paper, it was blindingly clear. And therefore, let me summarize before we part. Decision-making is a critical life skill. The biggest enemy we have in the world is our own gnawing doubts. The original fate of man was sealed by his original sin, and that sin was introducing doubt to the world. He ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The knowledge of good and evil means the intimate bonding between good and evil. The Kabbalists call it Ilana Desveika, the tree of doubt. And when he ate from the fruit of that tree, he did not become evil, he became confused. And Hashem allowed him to become confused. After eating the fruit of that tree, he hid under the trees of the garden, pretending that God could not see him. What was Hashem's response? Hashem enters the garden and he says to man, Ayeka, where are you? I cannot see. You play the game that way? You play the game as if I cannot see you? I am your shadow at your right hand. You think I cannot see you? I respond, where are you? I do not see. And when man drags himself from out of the bushes and faces God with all his humiliation, Hashem says to him, Hamin ha'etz? Did you eat from the tree? I don't know. You tell me. That's man's tragedy. We invoke doubt. We bring doubt into the world. We cannot decide clearly because we cannot see clearly. What is previously true and false now becomes the mixed picture of good or bad. And from now on, we must learn to make havdalah. We have to learn to make categorical distinctions. Your distinction is only 51% and 49%. Fine. Once you've done that, you make a categorical distinction. This is 100 and that is 0. With those thoughts, I leave you. I'm sure that your life from here on in will be a simple matter of decision making as you build your Torah wisdom so you come to see the world in its true objectivity. And if you would like to do an exercise that carries this forward, I would suggest you take a chart of paper right now in front of you. Why don't you as a group choose a challenging decision, right? Whether it's get married, not get married, a more trivial decision, buying an object. In your group, decide what the exercise shall be, and then spend a little while together making charts and debating how you assemble the variables and how you weight them. You'll find this a very instructive exercise, and you can take that forward and use this in all your life decisions from here on in. And my tefillah, my prayer for you and for all of us, and my bracha, is that we should achieve the crispness and clarity of decision making so we can get back to that level of man before the sin where truth and right was absolutely clear. Very best wishes to everyone.
Thanks for listening to Rabbi Dr Akiva Tatz for Sinai X. The Mishnah we learned together at the start of today's session taught us to be patient in judgment. The Tiferet Yisrael, one of our great commentators, explains that our Mishnah is not only talking to a judge in a court of law making a judgment, but it is actually talking to each and every one of us. It is telling us that we all need to be patient in our own judgments, our own decision making. It is a call to slow things down, to think rationally before we decide on a course of action. We must ensure that in the rush of life, amid all of its pressures, we maintain the presence of mind to make sensible decisions. Rabbi Tatz has just given us a very practical guide to decision making.